on my intro. They told me I had an intro tonight. Did you do it?
Pardon?
Did you already do it and I didn't know it? Huh?
No.
You just changed your mind.
No, we can still do it.
Oh, well, no, we're not going to do it, folks. I'm just... See, somebody came up and told me, they asked me whether they could start doing an intro sometimes, and I said, sure. But then I said, as long as you don't mention... And what surprised me, the person went, hadn't even crossed their mind. Which, by the way, you people out on TV, if you're interested at all, I've already done it since we started taping it this way, and I guess I'll do it again. For instance, about now, we get requests in here that may sound like I just drew them out of thin, plain air that people have picked up from, I hate to tell you, but other things I'd said or written somewhere, and sometimes I use them since somebody's requested. And one of them was that somebody had mentioned, we were talking about, if you recall, the primary and the secondary worlds of man, that it went something like, it's probably in that bowl somewhere, I'd never find it, but it went something like two guys were talking, and one of them's a kid and an old man were talking, and a kid said, or the old man said, I get it. That's the benefit of quoting yourself. You can muck it about, and you can't complain. He said, if the intro to a book is long enough, you don't ever have to get around to actually writing the book. And the kid said, well, what kind of book would that be, Father? And he said, the book of the secondary world. Which is apropos, because I've already killed 5 minutes, see, like leading up to this, and if I could keep it up. I have pointed out the examples that seem clear enough to you if you do not see it as a criticism, like today in the great world of television is internal to a program, like a news program is an obvious one, or it seemed like an obvious one to use an example because in some times past they believed that news programs in some way were what? Oh, I don't know, like serious, newsworthy, nonfiction, that in some way they were separate from, you know, Gilligan's Island was not, I assume that most people seem to think that Gilligan's Island was in some way quantitatively at variance with the ABC nightly news. So let's take that, and you've got this 30-minute news program, and nowadays they eat up a fair amount of airtime that they don't have to pay someone to have to write copy. That what they do is say, we're about to go to a commercial, and they say, stay tuned because coming up, and they won't just say coming up is the latest news from Bosnia-Herzegovina. They will even show a little film, just a little teaser of 15 or 20 seconds about what they're about to show. Do you understand? And it's eating up part of the show. Now, this is not a criticism, but let's take that 30-minute closed system, and what you've got is a microcosm of the secondary world of man. And it has, the more complicated, the more complex it gets. In fact, the more evolved it gets in the secondary sense, the more this is going on, that it engages in a continual form of self-reference and a continual form of self-fueling. But from one view, the self-fueling amounts to nothing. It's like a continual introduction. Now, to make this sound at all, we have to go through this kind of process that I can say, well, it's not exactly a criticism, but remember, we've already decided what the only thing that is exact in the world is to say, if it's in the secondary world, if something's in a closet, the only thing you can say exactly is that it's in there. Anything else you say, if you're going to be exact, you got to say, this is not exact. Huh? All right. Life itself, the more complex it gets, the more it engages and spends its own time referring to itself, which, where I was getting at, you could take a view, if we were ordinary, and take it as being critical. Which, if you were just listening with one or two ears to start with, thus far you could say what was a criticism of television or the news. That in some way they're so dumb or lazy that now they're getting to the point that instead of putting in 30 minutes worth of news, not counting commercials, instead of 30 minutes worth of actual reporting on the news, they must spend 5 of those minutes saying, stay tuned, here's what's coming up. And if we were ordinary, you could say, hey, I'm no idiot. Of course, it's hard to explain why you got a TV and got it on if you're going to then say you're not. But anyway, all right, I'm no extraordinary idiot. Now, that's better. Oh. A man could say, me speaking for an ordinary man, which I feel qualified. I have a card for any of you who are union people. I can prove it later. An ordinary man could say, well, wait a minute. I am no complete dummy. What they're doing is they've got me turning in, spending part of my life to watch the 30-minute news. I want news. I didn't turn in to see some kind of Brady Bunch has a hernia. Or I wanted to see the news. I wanted to see important crap, stuff, news, items. But I see what they're doing now. You know, it's only took the man, I don't know what, 10 years after I once mentioned it. Now he's beginning, wait a minute, they're not giving me 30 minutes worth of news. I am being cheated. I'm getting 5 minutes. What's the worst we could say about without using blatant profanity, which wouldn't even cover it? What kind of idiot do they take me for? Because 5 minutes out of every 30, they're now just saying, well, stay tuned, we're about to do so-and-so, and then it's like they take a short break and come back and do it. I'm getting sick of this. No, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. No. Now we got to get past even the illusion of some sort of criticism of life. That is the secondary world. And it took the secondary world reaching, here comes one of the nice segues, if you can begin to see how life is so efficient. The more complex it becomes, the more it engages in self-reference. And from one view, you've got to assume, though, when I say from a view, you've got to assume that the secondary world has a serious objective goal to it. You've got to assume that, like the news is important. You've got to assume that. And I'm not saying it's not. But, you know, for an ordinary people, they say the news, that's one of the ways, that's one of the benchmarks to prove that you are an up-to-date, sophisticated, with it, intelligent person. Am I not correct? Sure you are. Is that you keep up with the news. How are you going to feel staying around if some other intelligent person of our ilk is at a party and the conversation lags somewhere away from inflatable dolls and somebody mentions Bosnia-Herzegovina and you think, is that some kind of new doll? And of course, may I say so, you look like a complete idiot. Which shows that a man needs to keep up with the news, right? That it is important. Well, back to the reality of it, as the reality exists there, it is important, right? It's important to get by. Some of you are out in the business world, you're trying to get by. It simply is. You have to have some, nowadays in our part of the world, which is the part of the world, you have got to have some sort of operational, walking around knowledge of the news. You don't have to be an expert, but you have got to know where parts of the world are. You've got to be aware of the fact that the USSR is yesterday's news. You've just got to keep up with the news. So it is important, other than this fact. If you got any sense, the news is not important. But I know some of you still like the story. Somebody found it was one of these sailing magazines. A guy went down to rent a boat down the Caribbean, and he was a real news freak. They were out sailing for a couple of weeks, and he was going crazy after the first several days, and he finally found a newspaper that stuck down there under the cushions in the back, and he was just delighted and read it and reread it and discussed it with his wife, and finally she picked it up. She wasn't all that interested and realized that the paper was 2 years old. And this was a man who kept up with the news. It's not all that funny. Huh? The point is, from another view, not an ordinary view, but if you're wanting an ordinary view, turn on the Brady Bunch. This is not the Brady Bunch. Unless, well, I wanted to make sure that those little nippers hadn't got behind me about to break into song. About to break into song and sweetness. From a more complex view, from a view that has nothing to do with the runnings of the ordinary world, it is simply this. The news is not important, and nowadays that is beyond silly, it's beyond criticism, because, let me remind you one more time, you know that the news is important. It's good business. They make more and more money out of it, the networks, but it is important to the ordinary world to know what's going on, other than this fact. If you're not standing knee-deep in the ordinary world, if in some way you are not, in the main, a participant in the secondary world, the ordinary world, the news is irrelevant. It just almost seems that can't be true, but if you think about it, if in some way now you had hit the lottery, you did not have to work, and assume that you were not Beau Brummel, or you were just not motivated by some kind of social firecracker up your rear end. That is, that you could be a hermit and not care at night. You didn't have to work. You just kind of stayed in the house and didn't do anything. You'd find out from another view that the news is irrelevant. I know it's hard because you're not used to it, and the man could say, well, it is relevant. Because what if right now, what if the Ukraine, which I've never trusted anyway, they decided, well, screw all this, everything's falling apart, and we do have a couple of nuclear warheads here that Gorbachev and those guys overlooked. Let's just shoot one toward Charlotte, which is close enough to give some of us the willies. And a man could say, well, it's important. You should keep up with the news. Because what if they had launched one, and now we know about it, and we're sitting over here, and you didn't know about it? Which is all right until you think about it for a second. That is, if you think about it on the basis of the great secret that might be behind all this, that is, the blank wall, to say, well, it'd be important to know that it's on the way. Do I have to do all this? Do I have to play Larry, Moe, and Curly and go, hey, boy, you'd be sorry. What if they had launched a nuclear warhead at us, and you'd gone into this some kind of weird intellectual boogaloo that you're in now about the news is not important, and all of your neighbors and everybody else had turned it on and knew that it was an hour away, and now you are and decide, I threw away my TV, I don't listen to radio, and you didn't know it. Boy, you'd be sorry then. Where's the Brady Bunch now? I need some backup singers. From one view, if you're not playing in the secondary world, in the ordinary world, if that was not your main playground, which there's nothing wrong if it is, it's just a hobby, but to believe that that is the end within itself is to believe that the news is important. And if, of course, you believe that, it is important. I've already admitted that. It's important just to your job. It's important to get along with your social peers. Nowadays, if you were fairly intellectual and took a bath every now and then, you probably couldn't get laid unless you knew something, because you'd probably scare any decent girl if you was there at the bar and really hard up. I mean, she'd at least figure, you're some kind of psycho that she's never even seen if she just said something casual like, what's your sign? And you were so behind in the news that you didn't know what a sign was. That kind of thing. So the news is important, other than this fact. If you didn't think it's important and your life was not dependent upon where the news originates, it's not important. Which is why I made, I guess, in one view, the somewhat facetious example about how important it would be if there's a warhead on the way, no way we can stop it, and we're all going to be dead folks in 30 minutes, and we were so dumb and out of it that we didn't even know it, and everybody else did. Boy, aren't we going to look like the fool tomorrow? All of that is back to that little story that, and there are another conditions that I made up more or less that somebody asked about, is this old man told the kid that if you can get the preface to a book, if you can get the introduction to a book lengthy enough, then the work itself never has to be read. And then he described it as, well, that is the book of the secondary world. There is a certain kind of missing link in there, because that is not simply the book of the secondary world. That is the secondary world. It is no flaw. It is not to say that the book never gets written. The book cannot be written. Or if you'd like to put it another way, I think it's over in that bowl too, but I'd never lay my hands on it, that said, the primary world has no stop signs, the secondary world, no brakes. Which, like everything, is not literally true. The primary world has one stop sign. You got it, the big D. It's got one stop sign. But other than that, there is no stop sign, such as you do not eat, one of the great wheels on the tricycle of the primary world. You do not eat one time and that's it. There is no stop sign. You don't eat one time and go, well, now we got that down. Mark that off the list, Hubert. We don't ever have to do that again. That would be a stop sign, and it's not true. There are no stop signs in the primary world. You cannot stop. Humanity cannot lay each other one time and the race go on, which I'm sure there's probably some people that find that somewhat agreeable. That I've had occasion to get laid more than once in my life, and I was doing good, helping humanity while doing it. So that's what happened to the Brady Bunch, inbreeding. The primary world has no stop signs. The secondary world, no brakes. But it does not seem that way. In the secondary world, that's the point of the news, that's the point of what seems to be the hobbies and the goals of the secondary world, apparently is, well, I want to get somewhere, accomplish something. The obvious ones being like, well, I want to be president of the company. I want to own my own Ferrari 18-wheeler. That there is a goal, and if I get there, then I will have accomplished something. You can't. You won't. You don't. And yet men have to believe they do. You have to continue to say you do. That the secondary world, men are continuing, they don't say it this way, of course, but men are continuing to holler, where are the brakes on this thing? Or men to say, I'm about to put on the brakes. I'll grant you one more time, that's not what they say. They look at it on the basis, I'm about to get somewhere. But what they're saying is, I'm about to on the brakes. It's the same thing as a man turning to his friend, and they're about to be paid for the week, and he says, this paycheck, once I get in the bank, pay my rent, this is going to put me over the top. I'll have enough for the down payment on that Maserati. But what he's doing is saying, I put the brakes on one thing. I'm about to succeed. There are no brakes in the secondary world. There is a great dream of brakes. There is a great longing for brakes. Under many different names. Consider, in light also, for those of you who have been watching or listening for the last few nights, about the point that words play in the secondary world, about the secondary world in essence, once you can see it in a certain way, being words, composed of words. Then such ideas as I presented as the news, and let's assume that it continues in the way in which it's going, since the secondary world has no brakes. It will continue as it's going until it goes somewhere else, but it will not suddenly come to its senses. That is, such as the news programs. To bring you up to where my brain was right then, I know I stepped ahead, that's what I was getting at. This, if we took it as an attack, I was pointing out that no longer do you get your money's worth. You do not turn on Tom Brokaw or whoever it is and get, by God, 30 minutes worth of news. You can look there in your little newspaper and it says 30 minutes worth of network news, 7 o'clock. You don't get 30 minutes worth of news. Forget the commercials. You don't even get 30 minutes worth of news. You get 5 minutes worth of them saying, stay tuned, here's what's coming up, and they show you a little bit of that, and sure enough, a few minutes later, they show the damn same thing, and all they did. They're not fooling us. I already spoke for you. We got that down. We're on the record, on tape. That's better than being on the record. Videotape, that we're no longer fooled. We see what they're up to. All right, if we did that to them, you might think they would go, mea culpa. Oh my God, we've been caught by a bunch of dunderheads. The public caught on to us that NBC, we'll write them. Go ahead and write them. Use my name. Marjorie Culhane. Wire them, don't write them, fax them, and say, all right, you smart aleck people there in New York, you think you're fooling us. You got these big fancy jobs and these titles running the news and announcing, stay tuned for the 7 o'clock 30-minute segment of network news. Right, go ahead, tell them. Say, you're not fooling us, we see exactly what you're doing. A year ago, you were spending 5 minutes 5 minutes and 20 seconds promoting inside the show what's coming up. I have been clocking it. It is now up to 6 minutes. I see exactly what's going on. Do you follow where we're going thus far? Do you think that the network news would go, uh-oh, what are you, nuts? You hadn't caught them doing anything. It will increase. But you understand, from one view, that's what I was trying to play out for you, from one view, which is not absolutely insane, there is a valid form of criticism to say, well, come on. Don't keep saying that you're giving us 30 minutes worth of news when you're spending 5 minutes of it simply referring to yourself. Now, I'm just using an example of the teasers and the previews of Stay Tuned, but you could do it other ways. You could do it directly with the kind of self-reference that the news could say, well, here's the news, and that we have, and they do this, it's just not as glaring, but you'll surely hear it when I say it. They'll say things like, and now we have an exclusive NBC interview with Mr. So-and-so, the convicted killer who killed 14 of his children and plus tore down a U.S. mailbox, destroyed it. He has been in jail. I'm just making, but let's assume that you got some interest, it was some news, that they're about to do this. But they say he is now in the 5th year of his 7-year sentence, which was recently, as we reported to you first here last week, that the U.S. Supreme Court has refused to hear, so it still stands the conviction there in the great state of Indiana. And as we reported to you that week, the Supreme Court will not hear it, and this is the first time, here exclusively on NBC tonight, the first time that Mr. So-and-so has given an interview since we reported on his trial at some length, as you recall, 2 years ago. Now, do you see, you just don't normally notice it, I'm just trying to get you to see one more time, that is a form of self-reference, that is a form of extracting, if we're assuming that 30 minutes worth of news has some value. And that to you, I tune in to hear 30 minutes worth of news, by God, I want my 30 minutes worth. They spend part of the time referring to themselves, which is the same thing as a teaser. Or if you don't see it the same thing, look at it this way. Anything that they can subtract from having to actually go out and report news and send a reporter out, and that the guy, he's going to be there. He's on salary, whoever's reporting the news, and he says, stay tuned for what's coming up. He's already got to be there. So it's like they're getting him gratis. Or if he says, and now we're about to show you, sit right where you are. It's no teaser. This is actual news coming up, and it's exclusive. I happen to have gone there, and I'm the one who did this. We got the film ready. I am the only reporter that this man has spoken to since he has been there. Do you understand what's going on? It sounds like it's news, and it's not news. What it amounts to is, here comes the news, here comes the news. And Pygmy Markham's been dead. So I don't think he had, at any rate. I'm sorry, you're just not old enough or hip enough to know some of these American philosophers. Here comes the news. That it sounds as though we're involved with this, or I'm going to read the book. Let's see, I bought the book. It's exactly the book. It's titled, Everything You Wanted to Know, Being the Dunderhead That You Are. The Juicy Secrets of the Brady Bunch. Something interesting, and you bought the book. Only $37.50, and you begin looking. And it's got the intro from the author and he begins to talk about all the effort he had. How many of the Brady people didn't want to talk to him? How many of them are in jail? And you begin, and you read, and you read, and you read, and you suddenly realize this $37.50 book that, looked at was nice, big, and fat. Maybe you even turned the back of the page, being the good consumer you are, and realize you'd notice that it's 430 pages. You thought, $37.50, but that's a big book. But you're reading the intro. So you buy it and you're reading the intro, and it seems like it's rather lengthy, and finally you happen to look down, which if you never noticed this, they're pretty good about intros as they used to be, that they would number them funny with those little letters that didn't look like Arabic letters, so that you wasn't really sure how much room it was taking up. Anyway, somebody seemed to come because they used to do the the Latin notations of the intro. And you'd think, well, once that gets through, the actual book would start at 1. But sometimes in the past, it wouldn't start at 1. if the Latin things with intro went up to like 50, suddenly the first actual, quote, page of the book started at 51. But at any rate, there you are sitting with your $37.50 book that was, whatever I said, 420 pages, and you think, well, this intro certainly has gone on a while, and you just, your eyes sort of inadvertently glance at the bottom of the page, and here it is, you're reading the intro, and it's page 110. But let's say it was fairly interesting. You sat there, you didn't go berserk yet, except you realize, wait a minute, you know, a fourth of this book, a fourth of my $37.50 of wanting to know the juicy tidbits of the Radio Bunch, is in essence the author telling me about what he's going to do or what he had to do to get up with this. It's not really what I bought it for. I dare say that there are very few homicides or even physical assaults on bookstore owners from people who've gone through that, because it goes on all the time. And you never hear of people, you know, book buyer in Omaha goes berserk and shoots 3 employees at a Walton while waving a book and mumbling something about untoward, lengthy introductions to good books. You never hear that. We're back to this. I'm just wanting you to see that as always, as strange as this may sound at times, I can't believe you said that. That's strange. That I can point out something in perhaps a way you hadn't thought about before. But then I can also point out, and I can take that conversation and say you could from an ordinary view, if an ordinary person ever had this view, and say, you're right. You know, I don't like that. That's a good area to criticize, even though I say, wait a minute, it's not criticism. Then I can go ahead and play the part to get you to try to bring it into focus and go, yeah, that's true. To buy a book, whatever it was, and it's not just some kind of gossipy book, any kind of book nowadays. If it says, Introduction to Mathematics, and you think, well, that's about as far removed as, you know, People Magazine Revisited or the Brady Bunch, but it's going to have an introduction. Whoever it was that wrote it, he could be the driest, most ungossipy intellectual in the world, but I can guarantee you that son of a bitch is going to have an introduction in there, something about him and all the trouble he went to and how hard it is to be a dry-brained intellectual and not having any fun in life, but you know, as long as it may help some of you people. And of course, it'll apologize for his poor penmanship. And, you know, he's been feeling bad lately and his wife left him. There'll be an introduction, but nobody pays any attention. But I want you to see, you could, once I point it out, you go, you're right. I don't like that. I'm glad you brought that out. Then you got to ask yourself, if you've got any intelligence left after this, go say, wait a minute. I never thought about it, but you're right. I should object to that. Being the intellectual, you know, person I am, I think about it. Then you ask yourself, well, if I'm so intellectual, how come I never noticed it? And it's not because you're dumb. That ain't the point. It's not that now you need me to point out these little small irritants in life that heretofore you have not been properly irritated over, or over which you have not been properly irritated. It's not that. The point is, you're not supposed to notice it because there is nothing untoward going on. That, indeed, as I was, being the fearless procrastinator, that's not what it is it? Prestidigitator. No, that's not it. What do you call somebody that tells the future? A sick weatherman. Oh. Prognosticator. I will predict what I was going to say, that not only now that we have found them out, now that I have pointed out in an irrefutable fashion how the networks are taking advantage of us by not giving us our full 30 minutes worth of news when we set aside that block of time out of our busy, busy lives to sit down and get 30 minutes of good, useful news, and they give us 25. And not to apologize. Make it sound like a big deal. Stay tuned for this news, because as soon as we come back, here's the news you're going to hear. Roll part of that tape. And they roll part of it, and sure enough, they come back and they roll that same piece. Why have you never noticed it? Because you're too dumb? No. Several ways I can explain it. The obvious one that you should be able to begin to see, you're not supposed to notice it. And if you don't like that, look at it another way. That what you took is me pointing out some error, some aspect of life worthy of criticism, is I'm wrong. Because there's nothing worthy of criticism going on. And I was going to get to the prognostication. Not only, now that we found them out, and most of you, I can see you holding them, have pens or probably typewriters or word processors at home, And you could write the networks if you wanted to, or call them, and complain and tell them that the jig is up. You will not, because the jig is by no means up. My fearless prediction is it will get worse. It will increase. And why? Because that is the healthy way. The secondary world lives off self-reference. The news will become more and more, this is not the exact explanation or description of it, but remember, there is no such thing as exact except what we exactly already spoke of. The news will be more and more the self-reference of the news. As a secondary world expands, what is taking place internally is more and more not just self-fueling, but the process itself of self-fueling. I can put it several ways. I'll bet you can. I mean more ways, okay? I believe that too. If the secondary world is some kind of sophisticated illusion, sophisticated in the older sense of that word, which is not complimentary for those of you that don't have a real old dictionary. The secondary world, how about a world of pretension? Let's assume that we're all down-home, God-fearing, Southern fundamentalist type religious bricklayers and roofers like God intended back when life was right. We would look upon the secondary world as a whole as being just one of pretension, would we not? Sure we would. If it is pretentious, it is getting more so. If you see it as pretentious, then you're in, as they say in Southern philosophy schools, you're in for about 40 acres of hard plowing. Let's assume that you're about 39, you're going to live to 70, and each acre represents a year, that kind of thing. In other words, if that's your view, it ain't going to get no better. They do not have any sort of visual operations that will cure that. It is what I was going to call a prediction, just as a joke, what I was pointing out, is the secondary world. And I'm talking about its highest levels, at its most sophisticated levels, such as the news. It will be more and more of them saying what they're about to do. It will be more and more of them saying, we have news tonight. We have news that we will assure you is of a singular nature tonight. We are going to present news that no one else will present tonight. We, whoever it is talking, it doesn't matter whether it's a network. Of course, we get good, and I end up here pointing out the allegory that the networks are simply your brain. The networks are simply life. It could be a newspaper, be anything. It is an outlet, and you take it as being external, and you take it as being almost institutional. You take it as being, if you're ordinary, you take it as being more intelligent than you are. Why else would you turn it on? Now, I know you could say, well, it's not just more intelligence, they just have more information. That's why I turn on the news, because they know things I don't. That's right, that sure doesn't fit my offhand, my slip of the tongue when I said, you think anything institutional is more intelligent than you. I'm glad you pointed out to me how wrong I was. They're going to more and more refer to themselves. Not just give the teaser of here's what the news is coming up. They will more and more talk about that I am the news you're listening to. Here's what we have done to bring you this information. Here is why it is superior. And, well, we've about run out of time tonight. But tune in tomorrow night, because there's going to be news that is singular, unique, socially astounding, intellectually enlightening. And they keep, making sure they're about run out. It is news without peer. It is, may I say in all humility, for me and all the people here, the great news team, there's Betty and, Fred left, but all the great, we'll introduce them maybe tomorrow night. We have people all over this world doing nothing. We're not here, it's not money as far as we're concerned, it's a profession. Nay, may I dare say, almost a calling. To bring you the best news possible, the widest coverage. We have people, I don't know who you believe this, almost every other network has abandoned Lebanon completely. Well, at least Beirut, no one will stay there except us. And no one knows that they keep looking, and by God, they've about run out 30 minutes, but if you didn't listen in a certain way, you would not find anything out of the ordinary. Now, the way I have, in a way, parroted parodied it, you may go, well, I'd notice that. No, you wouldn't. It goes on every day. And you never noticed it before. I just overdid it. But now that I've even made that kind of burlesque out of it, you still won't notice it if you're ordinary, because there's nothing to notice. And you can say, well, yes, there is. Now you point out that they're not really telling me, they're not bringing me the news. If you're correct in your prediction, it will be even less news. Yeah. Less of what you call news. It'll be more and more of self-reference, of them telling you either a combination. The self-reference is really better than the teasers, because the teasers has a certain limitation. If you say, well, stay tuned, here it comes up, and they show you 30 seconds of the 2-minute film coming up after the next break. They have eaten up, they've turned a 2-minute film on some farmer's strike in France. They got a 2-minute film with a voiceover already on it, but they've turned that 2-minute film magically into 2.5 or 2 minutes and 20 seconds through the simple trick of saying, well, when we return, we'll be showing you the strike that went on today in Paris of the farmers. And they showed 20 seconds of it. And then they fade out and go to commercial. And you think, well, hey, that's kind of informative. I know what's coming up. Well, it's nice to know intelligent people like you. But you understand they took 2 minutes of film that they spent money on. Now follow all this, because I hate to say this, but we're talking about now, we're getting the serious, the big A, Albany, allegory. They took 2 minutes worth of film and through magic, before your very eyes, turned it into 2 minutes and 20 seconds with no additional effort. It is friggin' magic. It's close to perpetual motion. It is close to being able to eat your own feet and not be accused or even experience the adverse effects of cannibalism. They have turned 2 minutes into 2 minutes and 20 seconds, just like that. But as I said, that has a certain built-in limitation. Figure it out. It has to do with the operation of the human nervous system. They can only go so far. And you, even ordinary people, would begin to adversely react to it. It has physical limitations. There are no such parallel limitations if you get outside of teasing. That is, if here's the preview coming up, and you use the preview to expand what you got. It's news helper. Enjoying, it didn't come from Betty Crocker or whoever makes it. It's just instant news helper. It just extends 2 minutes into 2 minutes and 20 seconds by saying, here's what's coming up as soon as we come back. That has certain limitations. There is no absolute like limitation if you're into self-reference. That is, it's really the same thing, but it's not the same thing as I'm going to wrap up in a minute and hopefully drag you right up to the punchline with me. When it seems to be self-reference rather than teasing, that is, rather than previews of here's what's coming up, it does not have the same electrochemical limitation that goes through the nervous system if they simply promote themselves on the basis of how good this is, the effort we've gone to. Not showing you specifically, but just a general self-reference on the basis of, aren't you glad? You should be glad that you tuned us in. Because we do not fool around. If they got really good, and I started, one of them someday, it'd be short-lived, but they could use as their self-promotion the fact that they don't engage in this kind of teasing and preview of trying to turn 2 minutes worth of film into 2 minutes and 20 seconds. They could even say, there's what the other networks do. We don't do that. All right? Before I came here, before we changed management here at this network, there was some of that going on. We'll admit that because that's the kind of guys we are. When we realize our mistakes, we will admit it. I mean, we'll admit it on the air. I don't mean back here in the... See, I'm on the air. Remember this. It's not... I'm on the air. We don't go back there in the back rooms and say, ooh, somebody wrote us. A bunch of people wrote us and said that they realized that we were taking 2 minutes worth of film and turning it into 2 minutes and 20 seconds with no additional information coming out, just on the basis of saying, stay tuned, here's what's coming up. We realized that when somebody pointed out to us that that's true, and it's not fair to the viewing public. That's the kind of guys we are. Now, I know those other networks. You understand, I'm still on the clock. We're still eating up to 30 minutes worth of news. I happen to know, I don't want to name names, but I happen to know for a fact that all the other 2 or 27 or 147 other networks got the same kind of communications. They've had that same thing pointed out to them. Have they done anything about it? No. We did. We did because That's the kind of network we are. And do you think we're going to stop there? No, anytime we can see. And it doesn't mean that we just have to depend upon you kind viewers pointing out ways in which we could improve our operations. If we see it ourselves, we will go ahead and strike. Won't we, gang? Yeah, we will. To bring you the best news possible. And be sure and tune in tomorrow night. That about wraps up tonight. We do have a... Now, can we get past news and books and all that? And can anyone smell anywhere an aroma that smells vaguely like, could it be, everyday life of being intellectual, being alive in the secondary world? That doesn't sound at all familiar. And many serious people in the audience went, my God, I hope not. Now, you've already ruined watching the news, assuming I don't get over it and forget it tonight, which, don't worry, you will. I guarantee it. But that would be bad enough. But what if that was the nature of the secondary world? I had a request. I don't know what it was. If it was, there is a man no longer fooled by the news, I guess. Well, I just thought, here's looking at you, CBS. Does anybody hear anything or smell anything remotely resembling, if you can extract, if it was possible, any form right now of anger over the fact, I agree, that for 40 years they've been treating you like a dummy. Of course, there's the trick. Anytime you say they've been treating you like a dummy, many people go, I knew it. It's surprising how easy it is to be talking in a way and doing whatever this is and having many people that are trying to listen to feel extremely confused for a good 45 minutes, not know what's going on until you say something like having people fooled all these years, and suddenly people straighten up like, I knew it, we'll finally get around. Now we're going to hear what the conspiracy is. I've been fooled. The fooling is on the basis of the human nervous system being, by all appearances, you just got to accept that they were getting where it started with us, that on this planet, in reality as you know it, that the human nervous system is unique in the fact that we have an operational mind that can speak. But then when you see, if you can do it with no criticism, that compared to everything but that mind, that compared to every other aspect of life, bar none, no exception, that compared to that, this is make-believe. Now, it's serious make-believe. People kill each other over it. But compared to, if you take this and you draw a line and you say, here is the human spirit. Take any of the terms you want. We've already agreed to that. But it's the human intellect. It's a brain working at the higher, up in the cortical areas of the cerebral lobes. It is there, and there's a line. You can cut it with a knife. You can do it with a scalpel. You can do it with a tack hammer and a Phillips screwdriver. But there is a line here below which you are not human. You are not human. So from that line down, compared to that, then from the line up, compared to it, is illusionary, is make-believe, is invented. But none of those are attacks. I know they're used at psychology, and everyday people say, hey boy, quit fooling around there playing with that damn keyboard in your room and go get a job. You think you're going to make a living in that? You're living in a dream world. That's an illusion to think that people are going to pay you to play that damn thing. Not that. It's not an attack to say that the world of man, the world of civilization is an illusion. That's no way. It's just comparably speaking, compared to eating and screwing and sleeping and freezing to death and burning up to death, then everything else, comparably speaking, is made up. It's a game. It's a deadly game. But compared to, from this line down, it is illusionary. It is a non-entering introduction. It is a book that is never finished because you never get past the introduction. It is a news program that never gets down to the end, or it's a series of news programs. Watch the news all your life. And what are you going to do? When you die, how are you going to feel? You're still going to be pissed. You're still going to be mad. Not the news program, but you're going to be mad at the news. Here I am dying, 65 years old, and your final breath, and you say, turn on the news quick. And you try to hold on to catch the last news show just so you can go out still mad. Damn! Are the Catholics in the process still fighting in Northern Ireland? Damn! I'm glad to get out of here. The world's full of idiots. The driving force, one description of it, of the secondary world, of the singular world of man, is that we got to get somewhere. And you can't. To get somewhere in the secondary world is self-defeating. It's a nice term. The more exact term is suicidal. So it does not happen. Life is not committing suicide. Life is big enough, large enough, tolerant enough that if you individually want to, you can probably get by with it. I mean, I can't guarantee, but if you go home tonight by yourself, you live alone, if you try to commit suicide and you got any sense, and if you're good with your hands, you can probably succeed. Life is not committing suicide. Maybe you want to. Life is not. So life at the secondary level, where the human nervous system is expanding, does not ever finish the book. That in one sense, it's not even begun to write the book. That's not even the point. And if you think it is, you got to ask yourself this: well, if that is the point, then we're a long way from it ever even starting to be the point, because I've been alive now 40 years, and until you mention it, I'd never the hell noticed. Not only you, 5,000 years worth of history on this part of the planet have never noticed. Contraire, they keep saying, well, we have got to do better. We got to go ahead and get this damn book written. We've got to finally get the news. Forget all this stuff about promoting the station and referring to yourself and giving teasers. We got to get the news of life. This is important. We're talking about our lives. And get that thing in some kind of comprehensible form. Wrestle that mother down to the ground. Slap it around. Get out of all the folly and the ignorance and the stupidity and the egoism. And we just got to straighten things out. And at least that sounds too much like a fundamentalist bricklaying preacher in his spare time. The form of it now is the ecologist, the political doomsayers. It just changes from here to there. But it's nowadays you can't find any intelligent person on this side of the planet. We haven't said the avant-garde of human civilization lately, have we? I guess it's safe now that we've moved our studios outside of Mississippi. But you can, as you should know, someone can stand up or state in print something about we can no longer, as a civilized people, we can no longer, as the stewards of planet Earth, continue to go down this path of destroying our planet. And you'll read it just as fast as hearing a nice Haydn symphony go through your brain and being civilized and nod along and go, yeah. That, hey, boy, it's good to keep up with news. It's good that there are thinkers on this planet, concerned people, like the man who said that. The man who said that's an idiot. I'm being crude, but it doesn't cost him more. Being direct. The man who says we can no longer go down this road. He is correct, but the man doesn't know anything. A dog knows that much. We can't go on comparing this because in a sense a dog knows more, because a dog knows that that's irrelevant. Because the dogs live in a world that only has stop signs. They even have the illusion of brakes. But a man who says it's just a form of voice in the wilderness. It's just a form of religion. It's to say it's obvious that we can no longer continue to treat our planet, or it could be more of a political based, and say it is obvious that we can no longer treat our fellow man in the kind of cavalier, prejudicial, political way that one country has another, that one political system has another. And there is no way to say that's not true, because I can do it myself. I can say, how true? If we don't stop that, we're going to have these decent people who used to make some darn good whiskey there in Ireland. They're going to wipe each other out. Now we got them going over there in the former Yugoslavia, which is easier to say than the province of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And then if you can get past that, you can say, yeah, and all you got to do is go a little further east and you've got the what? I know. The Armenians and the Azerbaijanis. And so you can make the statement, you can say, well, something, we can't go on like that. Well, that's true other than this fact. How have we gone this long? Because if we weren't doing that, it was what? Well, it was, last time I remember, it was the damn Phoenicians and the Greeks. And by the time they got straightened out, next thing I know, I turn around and what is it? It's the Spartans and the Greeks. Whew. And now what is it? It's the Greeks against themselves. Little political humor. It's obvious it was real little. Well, how about this? It gets awfully close to putting a punchline on this, but I can get out of it. Speaking in the secondary world, which is simply the world of man, the singular world of man, you don't have to like my term, and I'll drop it sooner. I'm getting sick of saying it. That's figure of speech because it doesn't matter. But the world of man. In that world, here it goes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference what people do. Except if they didn't do what they did, everything would be different. Man is not going to destroy the planet. But somebody has got to say, we're going to destroy the planet. You understand? And one of these two is wrong, right? It's got to be, right? Except life is a tricycle. And the lead wheel, and there's a dance going on. It's like a menage a trois on the floor in an upright position. The lead wheel always thinks at least one, and sometimes two of them together. They always think at least one of the wheels is acting funny. See, that's what the problem is of trying to explain that such as this. Now back to where we were. Life is not, let's assume that I'm correct, that man not only is not going to destroy the planet, he couldn't if we all got together and we plotted. We decided, I'm sick of these conspiracy theories, let's show life what a real conspiracy is. And we got 9% of the people, of us together, and decide, all right, let's conspire. We've had it. I'm sick of life. I've tried to be nice. I've asked for mercy. I've asked to have a better looking nose and be famous. And, you know, has life paid any attention? Nah. Let's teach it a lesson. Let's just destroy the planet. Well, sure, it'll kill us, but let's just do it just for spite. People saying that man's going to destroy the planet, let's assume that I was giving you a correct telling, just for the sake of us talking here at the end. It's not possible, men couldn't do it if they got together and tried, that they cannot destroy the planet. But here's where you start getting in areas of the closet that there's no good map for because of the electrochemical workings of the human nervous system. Then I can jump right in and do the part, and a man pops up and he says, you are absolutely incorrect. And he immediately shows film of an oil spill right now, killing animals, killing plants, destroying livelihoods of people right there on the coast, right there in the Biscayne Bay Area. All right, Biscayne. Biscay. And they show films and say, what do you say about that? And you can't say, well, you're incorrect. Because he says, if we keep this up, if we let tankers of this size continue to be built and come in this close to shore and et cetera, if this spreads, if this goes all over and it's up and down, not just the coast of Europe and South America, we can't have this. Now, any sane person, you're not going to say, oh, yes, we can. Let's have more of it. It'll be good for us. But the man, I don't care who he is. I don't care who he is. The man who says, here it is. Here's further proof. We're destroying the planet. The man knows nothing. Nothing. I mean, you can be educated and et cetera, but as far as knowing something, nothing. And yet, you do understand. I'm not attacking it. You do understand that he is a primary example today. Not primary in my sense. He is a exemplary figure to be speaking for life. Because what he is saying, all over the planet, people go, here, here. Yes, yes. That it's true. It's not possible. He doesn't understand anything he's talking about. His prediction, forget it. It's just not true. So what he is saying, it doesn't make any difference what people do, such as we can't build more tankers. Here's the real tricky part. You got 15 seconds. That may be correct, but he's not correct. It doesn't make any difference what people do. Other than the fact that if people don't do what they do, everything would be different. That a man who says, if we don't stop doing so-and-so, we'll destroy the planet. That's not true, but somebody had to say that, or we might have destroyed the planet. Bye.